Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 7 o'clock. Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The International Red Cross says 17 hostages are now in Israel after being released by Hamas in Gaza. Israel's prison service has confirmed the release of 39 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. It is the third of a 4-day pause in fighting. In total, the two sides have agreed to swap 50 Israeli hostages for 150 jail Palestinians. A 4-year-old Israeli-American girl was among those released earlier. US President Biden has welcomed the news and says he hopes the truce will be extended.
So I'm hopeful this is not the end. It's going to continue. But we don't know. And but I get a sense that all the players in the region, even the neighbors who aren't and have been directly involved now, are looking for a way to end this so the hostages are all released and Hamas is completely, how can I say it, no longer in control of any portion of Gaza.
Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has been meeting security forces inside northern Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu was given security updates and visited one of the tunnels discovered by his troops. The Prime Minister told his soldiers, "We have 3 goals for this war: eliminate Hamas, return all our abductees, and ensure Gaza does not become a threat to the state of Israel again." An Irish-Israeli girl who was initially feared dead has been reunited with her father following her release by Hamas late last night. 9-year-old Emily Hand was amongst 17 hostages freed by the terror group yesterday. She spent 50 days in captivity. 13 Israelis, along with 4 Thai nationals, were transported out of Gaza through the Rafah border crossing to Egypt. Emily was kidnapped from a kibbutz on the 7th of October. A man's been arrested on suspicion of a racially aggravated public order offence in London as tens of thousands of people marched against anti-Semitism. Police say he was heard shouting at crowds towards the end of the day. It was the second of 2 arrests. Earlier, the founder of the English Defence League, Tommy Robinson, was detained after he tried to join the march. It comes amid concerns over a rise in hate crime in the UK, sparked by the conflict in Gaza. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was at the march, described anti-Semitism as a virus which lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization.
What we're all doing here, and the only thing we're really doing, is showing solidarity with Jewish people. And that's necessary because since October the 7th, I'm afraid there's been a very peculiar response in many parts of the world, including, I'm sad to say, in London. And what we've seen is, I'm afraid, the re-emergence of anti-Semitism and a failure to focus on the appalling terroristic acts of Hamas.
We're live across the UK on TV, on digital radio. If you want us on your smart speaker, you can say play GB News. Now it's time for Free Speech Nation.
Riots in Dublin, the Netherlands, turns to the far right, and Doctor Who takes care not to misgender an alien. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics. We have a very busy night ahead. On the day of the first national march against anti-Semitism, we're going to be speaking to two members of a new campaign group designed to defend British Jews. After a shocking stabbing in Dublin this week was followed by violent riots, we're going to be hearing about how the reporting of the situation has major implications for free speech. And we'll have two guests on to debate whether the new president-elect of Argentina is a libertarian who can usher in a new age of prosperity or an extremely dangerous crank. And of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our wonderful studio audience tonight. My comedian panellists are Cressida Wetton and Jonathan Cogan. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Looking very dapper. You normally dress down for this show, but that's a nice corduroy top.
I think you have the exact same one.
I have. Yeah, I know you're trying to copy me in every respect.
Well, yeah. Well, I can't read as well as you, but, you know, at the same time, it looks kind of nice.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Cressida, you were out on the anti-Semitism march today.
Yes, the march against anti-Semitism.
Again, not the march for anti-Semitism. And how was it?
It was very peaceful. I was there for a couple of hours. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the story behind the story is you're trying to find a nice Jewish single doctor, weren't you? that's what I heard.
Well.
So cynical.
Anyway, let's...
Well, you downloaded JSwipe. All right, carry on.
What is that?
Oh, it's like a dating app for Jews. Yeah, no,
Are you making that up?
No, it's a real thing.
It's called JSwipe.
Yeah. There's also a willing to convert. Yeah, you're writing it down now. Yeah, look, I'll set you up. I know
Stop giving her tips. Yeah. OK, we're going to get some questions now from the audience. So our first question comes from John. Where's John? Hello, John.
Hi there. Are the far right on the rise in Dublin?
Yeah, so we saw these riots and clashes in Dublin this week. There was a horrific stabbing of children and a school assistant outside this primary school. Now, the chief police officer, Cressida, came out and said, well, this is just far-right thugs, this is people who've been radicalised online. What's he talking about?
Well, he's talking about some poor behaviour. The problem is, if you are a member of the far right, it's a brilliant week for you, isn't it? Because you've got lots of other behaviour to hide in. If people who are upset in general are being called the far right,
yes.
It's the same old thing of what exactly do you mean by far right?
The trouble is that does not accurately reflect what was going on there. Now, there were some people who looted shops. As far as I'm concerned, as soon as you're looting shops, you're not really part of that protest anymore. You're an opportunist, right? That's got nothing to do with the situation.
You've lost your political cards there, haven't you?
Right, exactly. Yeah. But that was a minority, and there were a lot of people who are very upset about the migration policies. This stabbing, we don't know the full details of who did it or the motives behind it. But the person of interest to the police was an Algerian.
Yeah.
And so people they've been raising concerns. The discussion hasn't been had, and so there's been a lot of tension. Now, I'm not for a second justifying riots and looting because I don't think that's right at all. But to just dismiss all this as a bunch of far-right activists is actually factually wrong, I think.
No, I think you're right there. I think the reaction that we saw yesterday was, pretty extreme. It seemed to be a generalised displacement of anger towards immigrants, which is never okay. You can't just tie everyone with the same brush and then attack a group.
Exactly.
But at the same time, you can't ignore people's legitimate anger when we see such a horrific event.
Well, I mean, again and again, the far-right do seem to benefit from the fact that sensible centrist politicians won't have sensible discussions about migration, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's no discussion going on in the middle, then people who've got legitimate concerns feel unheard, and they're more likely, aren't they, to... If you push something down, it'll pop up somewhere open.
Yeah, pretty grim stuff. OK, well, we've got a question now from Roger. Hello, Roger.
Hello. Does Doctor Who need pronoun lessons?
Well, Doctor Who's come back. David Tennant's come back into it for some reason. I thought he'd been killed off. Or something. I don't watch it, I don't know. But he's come back, and there's a thing's gone viral because the first episode had him discussing an alien's pronouns. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at this.
I promise I can help him get home, and then you'll never see me again.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
True. Yes, sorry, good point. Are you he or she or they?
My chosen pronoun is the definite article. I am always the me.
I think it would have worked, to be honest. Jonathan, What's annoying about that clip, I think? You seem a bit baffled by this.
The special effects have not got any better.
No, they haven't, have they? What is annoying about that is not so much... I mean, it's stupid, right? The Doctor asking an alien for its pronouns. Anyway, that's stupid anyway, on the face of it. But it's the assistant getting all haughty, saying, what, you're assuming the pronouns of this massive gremlin or whatever the hell
That's
it was.
a good point. I mean, as long as they change the name to Doctor Who/them... I'm
yeah,
right
exactly,
with it,
then it'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean, they were just sort of, I guess... They were just showing, like, hey, we're on side. That's what that was.
No, but it's hectoring. I mean, I'm a bit sick of this from the BBC, this constant sort of hectoring. It's like it's been taken over by a religious maniacal group.
It is like that, and I don't know who it's for. I don't know. I think the youth will be irritated by it. The young, hip people, if they exist, the people that
who watch Doctor Who. Are you?
Yeah, they don't watch Doctor Who. No, the hip ones don't watch Doctor Who.
So who's it for then? It's just to annoy middle-aged Doctor Who fans.
Well, I think it's for sort of upper middle class millennials who want to seem progressive to their children.
Well, I feel seen, so thank you.
Do you feel seen?
Yeah, I did. Well, my experience with Doctor Who is a KLF song that you introduced me to.
Oh, yes.
Doctor Who, that's all I know of Doctor Who.
That's all you know of it?
Also, my mum said that when she had laughing gas at the dentist as a kid, she used to have Doctor Who dreams. That's all I know about it.
OK, that's the limit. Well, I'm glad you've come on the panel.
Yes.
Because clearly you're an expert. I just think it's boring, for one. I mean, it's like slipping in a little bit of Marxist ideology or a little bit of hyper-conservative ideology.
It's not on a wink. It's just like, oh, we're doing it as well. That's what it is.
I think we're very sensitive to that, aren't we? We feel it. It's not moving the story along. It's just being beaten over the head with it.
But actually, the alien didn't care. The alien was like, no, I'm just the meat.
There's a based alien.
Yeah, based alien. There we go. Let's move on to a question from Daniel. Where's Daniel?
Hi, Annie.
Hiya.
So, are furries an oppressed minority?
Yeah, furries. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard of furries. These are people who enjoy dressing up as animals, usually for kinks. So the show Doctors, which is this terrible soap on BBC, and they had a whole episode about a furry, someone coming out as being a furry. So let's watch the clip, if we can have a look.
Oh, yes! I love it! OK, yes! Go, Valen! Woohoo! You look awesome! I'm going to get a bespoke suit, well, as soon as I can scrape the cash together. Does your seamstress do feathers?
I don't see why not. What are you wearing tonight?
Well, I've borrowed some things from the drama department, so we'll see how that goes.
Take that rubbish off. I don't want it in the house. It's perverted.
So, I mean, look, let's leave aside the terrible acting and script.
They used the same special effects team as Doctor Who.
They did, didn't they? There's no way that's a bespoke suit. No. That's like some cheap Halloween costume from Claire's Accessories. Yeah. But the thing about that is right, so basically this episode, I had to watch quite a lot of it to get the gist. They basically take all the tropes of a typical gay coming out story and apply it to a bloke who wants to dress as a bear. And he ends up taking his granddad, this bigoted old granddad who wants to throw him out for dressing out as a bear, to a furry club. And there's a bunch of people, I don't know if you've got the image, but there's a bunch of people in this bar sitting around, there they are, dressed up as, like, rabbits and pigs and cows.
Just gets double-teamed by a couple of
Jonathan, this is a family show.
Beg your pardon?
Family show.
That means a debate. But what time is it? It's after the watershed.
It's not after the watershed, Jonathan.
Oh, God.
But Jonathan was talking about two teams of backgammon players.
Yes.
Anyway, the point is here...
He was gammon, all right.
The point is here that they've taken him to what was... It feels like a satire of the gay experience of coming out. It's like a guy wants to dress up as a bear, the grandfather wants to throw him out, but then he brings the grandfather along to the club full of people dressed as bears, and the grandfather's like, actually, this is fine. It's really... I mean, isn't it actually the kind of homophobic, anti-gay satire you would have got in the 1970s, isn't it?
Well, it's very laboured. I don't know who isn't offended. I mean, gay people, probably furries, if they're watching. Shout out to Ben Henley, our friend.
Is he a natural furry?
I'm not sure.
I think so, yeah.
Stand up. Anyway, the point is...
Is it a friend of yours who dresses as a bear?
Yeah.
As a dog?
Not a bear, yeah. Was it as a dog?
As a dog,
Let's not dwell on this.
Let's not get waylaid.
But I honestly think that could be satire, because I think the acting is too bad.
No, I don't think so. You're giving the BBC too much credit there. That'd be too funny. That'd be far too...
I mean, it is funny.
Yeah, it's funny, but I don't think it's intentional.
You don't?
Maybe it is. Maybe I'm just missing the joke. Maybe I'm just not seeing the forest for the trees, but...
But if it is serious, then it does suggest a real problem at the BBC. Doctor Who asking aliens for pronouns.
Yeah.
A grandfather wants to throw someone out because he dresses as a bear. And that's meant to be a civil rights issue? I mean, Rosa Parks wouldn't have been up in arms about that, would she?
God, what would she have said about that? No, it's not.
Stop wasting my time, probably.
Wasting my time.
I've got actual issues to deal with. Yeah,
absolutely. Go to your furry convention.
Oh, it's just it's a nightmare. Anyway, we've got a question now from Omeron. Where's Omeron? Hiya.
Was the bubonic plague racist?
Was the bubonic plague racist? Well, there are some academics who think that it was, right? And this is at the Museum of London. And they dug up all these old skulls and bones and stuff, and they think that roughly 9 of the skulls or the bodies they dug up were of African origin. But then that's been contested. People have said that might not be true because they based it on shapes of bones rather than anything else. So that's dodgy in itself.
Yeah.
But they said that maybe the bubonic, how did they describe it? Systemic pre-modern racism.
Within the virus, within the
virus was racist. Yeah, the plague was racist.
No, they're very careful to say it's not the virus. It was the socio stuff going on at the time.
I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it?
Well, it is
Half of London got killed by this, right? So it wasn't a racist disease.
No, it wasn't. But also, would we be all that surprised to hear that people had different values and that maybe by today's standards, I imagine things were quite racist.
Well, there weren't many people of African origin in London at the time. There were some, but there weren't many, certainly. I mean, Queen Elizabeth wrote about... She was getting annoyed by I mean, she was a bit racist, Queen Elizabeth I. But the fact that she mentions this as a problem firstly suggests that there were black people in London at the time, but also that there weren't many. Right, so this idea that the bubonic plague and these people that they've dug up...
And also to find that from such a small sample size as well, it just seems to be very... You're looking for the... I think someone just fell off their chair.
I just wonder, why is this helpful, Jonathan? Why is this
it's not helpful.
I know Kemi Badenoch has criticised this and said that this is completely unsubstantiated and is going to heighten racial division.
Well, it gets clicks, doesn't it? It gets clicks and it gets people riled up, and that's what the media is.
So you're saying that I've fallen for it by getting riled up now?
No, but we're showing it for its flaws and its
exactly, we're just exposing it in a very clinical way.
We are the truth bringers.
And not getting remotely upset.
Yes, I'm a little bit upset. I'm a bit upset about... didn't make a bear joke when the guy came out, that I missed that opportunity.
Oh, you did, but it's gone.
Ah, too late.
Anyway, we're going to move on now to Ivan. Where's Ivan? Hi, Ivan.
Hi. Has the Netherlands got its own Donald Trump?
Well, that's what people are saying, isn't it? What do you think, Ivan? Do you know about this Geert Wilders guy?
Yeah, he's been around for a long time.
He has. I mean, a lot of people are upset.
Liberal who's now...
What do you say, sorry?
He's a sort of liberal...
Use the mic.
Liberal. Socially liberal, but anti-Muslim.
Well, he is anti-Muslim. I mean, he specifically said that he wants to get rid of... He wants to ban Qurans, he wants to ban mosques. That's dodgy. So this is not someone who... So, you know, I think this phrase, far right, is really misused a lot of the time. But I think those are far-right principles, aren't they?
Yes, you could say that some of his ideas are far-right.
Yes.
Which doesn't necessarily mean that he, in all of his ideas, is... But, yeah, definitely.
But isn't this interesting? Because people always said that when it came to the Netherlands, you know, that those people were always very sensible, liberal. After Brexit, they said that sort of thing could never happen there. But actually, because, again, it comes back to this point, people not having sensible discussions about migration leads to extreme reactions, right?
Yeah,
and I think that's what's happened here.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And if you're in a place that really prides itself on tolerance, it's not surprising that maybe you might shy away from what look like difficult discussions.
Yes.
You might not have them until you are having them.
Well, I mean, I do feel this because I was in Sweden recently and they have real problems with gang crime and they've had real problems with assimilation from really reckless levels of migration, actually, and no attempt to implement assimilation. And so a lot of the people I spoke to, very sensible, often left-wing, often liberal people saying, we just can't deal with this. You know, so it is about trying to find moderate, sensible solutions to these problems.
Any time when the discussion is off the table, that's when there's a problem. That seems to be ideology is overcome sort of rational debate. You need to be able to discuss things because you need everyone to be playing the same game, otherwise society doesn't really function.
And my concern is that I think there are racist groups who will capitalise on this.
Absolutely.
I mean, that makes me really uncomfortable, someone like that saying we want to ban mosques.
Oh, I believe in freedom of religion, absolutely. You can't... I don't think you should be able to tell people how they pray or what they read or, you know, that's...
Well, it's not a free society if you do.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, so it is a problem. So sensible discussion is surely the way forward, I would have thought. OK. All right, well, we're going to move on now. Next on Free Speech Nation, though, thousands of people have taken part today in Britain's first national march against anti-Semitism. And I'm going to be joined by two guests who are involved in a new campaign group which is there to defend British Jews. So do come back and join us in a moment.
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Now, thousands of people joined a march in London today against anti-Semitism, including former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The march follows an increase in anti-Semitic incidents as a consequence of the war between Israel and Hamas. Now, a new group, Our Fight UK, has been set up to combat anti-Semitism, aimed at convincing non-Jews that it's time to speak out. Mark Burbeck and Daniel Ben-Ami are both involved in the group. I'm delighted to say they join me now. Welcome to the show. So, Mark, I'm going to come to you first, because this group, Our Fight UK, this is your brainchild, yes? This is something you've created.
Yeah, created with other concerned individuals.
Yes. Well, what's the origin of the concern? Where did this start?
So, for me, the first step personally, after October the 7th, on October the 8th, the Sunday afterwards, more news was filtering through about what had happened. And then I heard about a vigil on October the 9th, on the Monday. And I have a number of Jewish friends, and I just couldn't bear the idea that I would see them a week later and say that I hadn't been to the vigil.
Yes.
I just thought, you know, it's time to go. And I went expecting to see lots of other people there who were non-Jewish. I just expected maybe a trade union banner. I expected just people to be so shocked by the events that they witnessed and the news reports on October the 7th. I just expected lots of people there. Naive. I was naive. I turned up on this vigil outside Downing Street. I bumped into one of my neighbours who's Jewish, and he actually asked me, "What are you doing here?" And it was like a real surprise, because it became clear over the following weeks and the various vigils that Jewish people did not expect support. They genuinely did not expect a lot.
Well, that's a very sad state of affairs.
It is incredible.
I mean, are you heartened, though, by today's march? I mean, that was a huge march.
It was a huge march. And I think it is very impressive, but there were lots of people who knew the words to the Israeli national anthem. You know, it was great. There were a lot more people. We had a banner there. So in the intervening weeks since October the 7th, it became clear that we needed to do something more than just simply turn up.
Yeah, I mean,
set up a campaign.
It feels like a time for action, doesn't it? I mean, Daniel, can I ask you your perception on this? Because one of the things that has really horrified me is the open declarations of anti-Semitism. And I'm not saying for a minute that everyone on those pro-Palestine marches is an anti-Semite or is doing that.
No, they're not.
But the fact that there are some people who feel that they can openly express anti-Semitic views in a public space surrounded by thousands of people and no one does anything about it, that to me has been quite shocking. Do you feel that way as well?
It is quite shocking, although, I mean, I set up a website after the last conflict in Gaza, and it's now forgotten. But some of these trends that have become very, very clear now were already beginning to be apparent in May 2021, where obviously after the Second World War, open anti-Semitism was very much unacceptable.
Yeah.
But now it's becoming more acceptable. I don't think it's the majority of the British population, but there's a significant minority who feel comfortable now about expressing anti-Semitism openly, which is quite shocking, absolutely.
What I feel is that it's a sign of normalisation, that if Hizb ut-Tahrir can stand there and call for jihad on the streets of London and no one else does anything and the police don't arrest them, that suggests a problem within that movement, doesn't it? Not that everyone endorses it, but that they're willing to let that go on in their midst.
I think there are two different but related things here. So there's Islamism, by which I mean Islamism as a political movement. So I'm not talking about the religion, but political movement. So Hizb ut-Tahrir is one example. And they have no inhibitions about being anti-Semitic. They're very clearly anti-Semitic. But also, I would say those movements, in a way, they kind of give permission to the kind of woke identitarian people, some of them anyway, to be more openly anti-Semitic. Because they think, well, if the oppressed, this is their thinking, that if the oppressed Muslims are being openly anti-Semitic, then maybe it's OK for us to talk about Jewish privilege and how bad Jews are. So there is a relationship between the kind of woke anti-Semitism and Islamism. So both, I think, are apparent at the moment.
So how have we got into this position? Because, as Daniel says, after the war, the idea of being openly anti-Semitic was just considered appalling because of what the Jews had gone through in the Second World War. Why have we now reached this position? I mean, obviously, the conflict has something to do with it, but do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think when you say after the war, the Second World War... Yes. So I think it's kind of interesting because the slogan, never again, is... I think it's a very powerful slogan, and I think we need to sort of re-establish that promise. So after the Second World War, everyone says never again, but it's kind of, we've got complacent, and nowadays people are saying never again is now. Some people object to that slogan, understandably. They're worried that it creates the idea that we're now in the midst of Kristallnacht again, or, you know, the day before, which I completely understand. But I do think we need to remake that promise that was made. So if you talk to older people, it goes without saying that you would stand alongside Jews. It goes without saying that October the 7th was a pogrom. They call it out. They say it like it is. They haven't got this kind of language that we see today where a kidnapped child was lost, you know, and found, you know...
And I saw that today. Who was that who tweeted?
You know, the Taoiseach...
the Taoiseach did it, saying that this person was just... as though it was an accident or something.
Exactly. It's the same kind of language that's used all the time. The BBC talk about, you know, Hamas gunmen. You know, so constantly, like Daniel says, it gives licence to people to have these kind of anti-Semitic tropes.
I think it's been very eye-opening, because it's not something I would have ever expected. The response to this, in particular, the denials of what went on. Hamas filmed a lot of their atrocities and boasted about them. Hamas tell us what their views are about Jewish people. They tell us that they're genocidal, that they want to wipe Jews out. They're very clear about that. So why... I mean, people denying what we're being told and what we see with our own eyes is something new, isn't it?
It is, but I think it relates to what you've written about quite extensively in general terms, not specifically in relation to anti-Semitism. Because if you have this idea of identity politics, where what's really important about individuals is their identity, what group they belong to, and then there's this kind of hierarchy of privilege. And you think of Jews as being kind of hyper-privileged, then you can say, well, this terrible pogrom on the 7th of October doesn't really count because, you know, these were hyper-privileged Jews that were being slaughtered. So in this kind of, from this warped identitarian perspective, it doesn't count, it doesn't matter, it's just the oppressed people rising up.
And isn't that revealing that even when it comes to mass murder, these ideas can be imposed, these sort of identitarian ideas It's as though people just turn a blind eye.
It's very revealing. So, as you well know, the idea is they present themselves as being really kind of humane and on the right side of history, but then they end up being blind to the worst possible kind of brutality imaginable.
And there's also this point that, you know, it's perfectly possible to be critical of the Israeli government and the way in which they're approaching the conflict without being anti-Semitic. That is a perfectly possible, consistent thing to do. So why is it so difficult for so many people?
Well, I think for us, the big issue now is to almost put aside all of the history and all of the people will backwards and forwards with you on, you know, who did what when, and continually return to October the 7th. Because what we're finding is that particularly young people today have lost their moral compass on this whole thing.
Yeah.
They've kind of said, well, what do you expect? With the context, what do you expect? What do you expect these people to do? And I think that's kind of crucial, because if you try and take that up on the sense of the argument, well, this happened this year, that happened then, you can't win. And in fact, actually, that isn't the point of the argument. You want to say to people, look, that was a pogrom. Call it out, like I said before. Say exactly what it was. Make sure people, and particularly young people, realise the scale of what we witnessed, and to realise that Israel is fighting effectively ISIS.
Yeah.
In the modern way. And I feel that's really important for us older people in relation to our kids. Because I think what tends to happen is people don't want to get into the argument. Well, because of all the woke stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of those young people on TikTok seem to be framing Hamas as some kind of resistance movement.
Absolutely.
They are genocidal, anti-Semitic terrorists.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they are, and that's what they say they are.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to reorient them and reorient our young people, not Hamas. You know?
Yeah. That's not possible at this point.
Yeah.
But that's a real moral failing, isn't it? There's this failure to distinguish between the tragedy of civilians dying in war, which happens in every war and is absolutely horrible, and nobody likes that. To be failing to distinguish between that and the deliberate targeting, rape, torture, brutalisation and murder of civilians by a terrorist group. These are not moral equivalents.
They're not moral equivalents. And on one level, I find it hard to understand, because the Hamas covenant, their kind of founding document, which has never been rescinded, is very openly anti-Semitic and genocidal. It's available in English. You don't need to go and learn Arabic to read it. It's been translated by Yale University. Their leaders make statements all the time about how they want to repeat the 7th of October massacre again and again and again. So they're completely transparent about it.
Yes.
It's not hidden. You don't need to read the Israeli media to get that impression. You read their own, Hamas's own propaganda, but people are blind to it.
Very strange sign of the times, really. OK, so, Mark, before you go, because we're out of time, can you tell us a bit where we can find out more information about Our Fight UK?
I would love to, yeah. So we've got a website, ourfight.uk, not .co.uk. It's ourfight.uk.
That was already taken, was it?
Yeah, it was indeed. And the Twitter account is ourfightuk.
Fantastic. OK, well, Mark Burbeck and Daniel Ben-Ami, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So next on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be discussing a week of shocking violence in Dublin and how the reporting of the situation has implications for free speech and may have exacerbated the situation. Don't go anywhere.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, 20% of voters haven't decided who they're going to vote for at the next election, which means it's all to play for in a year's time. My Mark Meets guest is Family Values Conservative presidential hopeful Dr. Taylor Marshall. Plus, full reaction to Nigel Farage's first week in the jungle with former stars of the show and detailed analysis. A packed programme, we're live at 9.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my panel, Cressida Wetton and Jonathan Cogan, and we're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you've got any problems at all, don't be shy. Just email us at gbviews@gbnews.com, and I promise we'll do our best to answer your problems. It's been a terrible week in Dublin with the shocking stabbing of 3 children and a school care assistant outside a primary school, followed by rioting and violence across the city. 34 arrests were made. Several Garda officers were injured in the riots, and the Commissioner, Drew Harris, said, and this is a quote, "People have been radicalised through social media and the internet." So was that the cause of the violence, and did the reporting of the incident worsen the situation? So here to discuss this, I'm joined by journalist and broadcaster Ella Whelan. Thank you for coming, Ella. So firstly, I suppose we should address why this has happened. What are the origins? What are the tensions here?
Well, the idea that it's simply an organised far-right outburst is a total misunderstanding of the complexity of what's been going on.
Yeah.
Anyone who looks at what these people did on that evening, looting Foot Locker, setting things on fire, as Cressida said at the beginning of the show, you know, a lot of it is just idiot behaviour.
That's opportunism.
You know, it's the kind of thing, the kind of thing that happened in the London riots in a few years back here, where people take an opportunity and they do stupid things, and there's not necessarily anything too dramatically political about that, but there is something that happened, and there's a kind of a boiling sort of pot thing going on here, which is that the way in which the incident was reported, of the 2 little girls being stabbed and the care worker and the whole thing that happened, the Irish media, Irish Times, leapt on the opportunity to say this was somebody who was a naturalised citizen. He'd been here for 20 years. There was you could almost feel the sort of tension in the Irish media elite saying, don't go there on the immigrant question, don't go there, even though Dublin is a small town, it's a capital city, and word had spread that what this person looked like, and so there quite quickly became this sort of tension of they're not telling us the truth.
Right.
They're lying. They're going to spin this a certain way, and I think that has been a large part of what fed into the outburst of anger. There's also the case that Dublin has had a lot of problems. Well, the whole of Ireland has, but in particular Dublin with housing and whether you want to call them the left behind, the sort of working class, whatever it is, there's a section of people still living in Dublin and on the outskirts who are extremely destitute, extremely poor, and extremely ticked off with the sort of Dublin Freesat. Pretending like nothing is wrong. There's real tensions in that city, and that has also fed into it, sort of spilling out. So it's a complicated thing to try and assess, and for me anyway, I think it's telling that the Irish media has got more het up about its imagination of a far-right attack than it has the stabbing of 2 children.
Well, there's 2 things, isn't there? I mean, firstly, going on a riot and setting things on fire, that's not a sensible response to anything, and that should be said. But also, if the media and the police are going to be smearing the entire group of people as far-right, won't that heighten resentment?
Yeah, it will. And I mean, Brendan O'Neill wrote for Spiked a few days ago talking about the fact that these people were called lunatics, so, which is, it might have been just a throwaway word by the Gardaí, but I don't think it was. It was a kind of, you have to be sort of mentally ill to not go along with the official line. And it has been nauseating, actually, listening to, in particular, British media coverage of what Irish, getting all these people from disinformation units in Ireland, academics, or Leah Varadkar also sort of defining this as sort of saying it's us and them. In fact, actually, Fintan O'Toole wrote an article over the weekend saying, Irish commentator saying, there's the us who are, we love immigrants, there's no problem, we're a nation of immigrant lovers and don't talk about it. And then there's them, these awful oiks who hate immigrants. And again, I mean, you wish that they'd get outside of the little area in Dublin and know that actually there are some tensions in relation to immigration. And no, not everybody's not far right, but there have been incidents in Ireland in which the discussion about immigration has been, much like it has here, just totally clamped down on.
There seems to be a mirroring here. I mean, there's a lot, this idea of an elite political class who are completely out of touch with what's actually going on. And they're just projecting this idea of how they would like things to be. Yeah, well, to take a very small example, that in a town near where my parents live, called Bortonluss, there was a sports hall that was meant to be being built. Planning permission takes 1 million years. In Ireland, it was a big rigmarole. And, for a small community, it was going to be a great resource. And, after the war in Ukraine happened, almost overnight, it was turned over to housing for Ukrainian refugees. Now, you can have an argument about whether or not you provide housing for Ukrainian refugees, and I'm sure lots of people would, particularly in Ireland, they were quite liberal about that. But you don't just get to undemocratically and unfairly snatch a resource from a community that had, was invested in it. And that kind of thing keeps happening. And it causes tensions in people who are not anti-immigrant, they're not sort of what the Irish media paint them as, sort of foaming at them out far-right types. They're people who want to have some kind of sense of fairness and a nuanced discussion about immigration. The problem is the more that this gets pushed underground, the nastier it will get. And there is a problem with anti-immigrant sentiment in certain parts of Ireland, and there are far-right people who would take an opportunity. And I think that those of us who are on the left or, liberal on immigration need to take this very seriously and not let the sort of Dublin Freesat set the agenda on discussions about immigration. I mean, one of the things that's really worrying is that this is pretty much given the Irish political elite the green light for an incredible bill around hate speech, which is one of the worst. I mean, really, it's one of the worst. Well, we've covered it quite a lot on this show because they are really pushing this through. And it does seem incredibly draconian. Almost, I'd say it's probably worse than Scotland's hate speech bill. And it will be weaponised. I mean, didn't the Irish government even say that they couldn't really define hatred?
No,
They defined it in circular terms. Hatred is hatred.
Hatred is anything that inspires hatred.
Great.
Sort of,
well, that's great. I'm glad that's on the statute books, nice and clear.
In a very kind of Irish way as well, the way in which they've discussed the bill is by saying, they have a little line where they say, you can be offensive, which is Irish people have to double speak, which is, you can't be offensive, because the next line says, but anything that could possibly incite hate, not incite violence, incite action, but incite hate, this nebulous term, will be outlawed. So you absolutely can't be offensive because most people don't feel hatred towards things that are offensive. So you end up in just this horrendous sort of quasi-intellectual soup of words that actually really means that there is going to be no free speech in Ireland, political or otherwise. And the thing that you just get so depressed about is that this won't have the outcome of a lovely country which is sort of tensionless and everybody gets along. It will do the exact opposite.
Well, I mean, you've spoken many times about censorship and the history of censorship, and we know that if you do this, if you try and clamp down on people's right to free speech, bad ideas do not disappear.
No, they don't disappear, but also you lose people who have a sense of principle on an issue, which is that you know, if you are, take the issue of immigration, if you are liberal about it and you think that you want to have a sort of nuanced discussion about it, and you have a load of people who might disagree with you, but who are saying, we are just not allowed to talk about this, we keep getting called racist, we keep getting called, all the nuance gets lost, and it ends up with an us and them mentality, which the Fintan tools of this world are very comfortable with because they like to look down their nose at people. But the rest of, you know, normal citizens who can see that having a concern about immigration does not make you a sort of Tommy Robinson type.
Yes.
I think they just lose all hope of any kind of nuanced outcome for the discussion.
But is it partly that the commentators and the type of commentators that you're describing there, they feel very comfortable with this because they know that their opinions, their set of values are currently on the same side as the Irish government and as what's considered the right opinions to have the Overton window, I suppose. Whereas, you know, how can they not be sure that this is laying a precedent for censorship of their own opinions later down the line?
Well, they're just, I mean, it's all tied up in a very neat bow in Ireland. I mean, if you take a different issue, discussion about gender ideology and transgenders with the teacher, Enoch Burke, I think his name was, who was eventually ended up in jail for a long saga of refusing to use different pronouns for a child in a school that he taught, a religious school that he taught. You know, there was such a clampdown of the way in which it was discussed in an RTE in Ireland, so much so that a one radio show that kind of had a really nuanced, open discussion about this was immediately petitioned and politicians support the petition to be taken off air. So there just is such maybe it's to do with the fact that the kind of history of Ireland and the way in which sort of social tensions work there, that they're a completely new sort of religious oppression, which you've written about in the New Puritans. Ireland is such a great example of that, of sort of don't rock the boat mentality, a kind of keep your mouth shut mentality within the political elite has just allowed a really repressive cultural attitude to kind of prevail. But the important thing to know is that normal people aren't going along with it, and there's a lot of bubbling tension, and it could go one of two ways. It could go in a kind of you hope, and I think we should push for it to go in a sort of pro-free speech, pro-freedom, pro-democracy, open debate way. But if there's too much clampdown, then it could go to quite dark territory.
Ella Whelan, thank you very much for joining me. And next on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be hearing about a new council for academic freedom, which has been designed to fight cancel culture at universities. See you in a few minutes.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. More than 100 academics at major universities in London have decided to set up a new council for academic freedom in an attempt to combat cancel culture. The London University's Council for Academic Freedom has been inspired by a similar movement in the United States based around Harvard. It will encompass all the universities in the capital, with the priority being to defend the principles of free inquiry, intellectual diversity and civil discourse. John Armstrong, a lecturer in financial mathematics at King's College London, is one of the co-founders, and he joins me now. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. So, free inquiry, intellectual diversity, civil discourse. All of that sounds fairly reasonable, but it also sounds like the default expectation for higher education. But is that not the case anymore?
Well, one of the surprising things that happened this week, we had our launch event on Monday, and as you say, it's fairly innocuous sounding principles, but we had demonstrators, and some of them were actually in tears.
Really? They're very upset. So there were demonstrators against free inquiry, intellectual diversity and civil discourse.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't make it clear which of the three
bother them
the most problematic.
But if they're crying, if they're actually in tears, I mean, what exactly do they want? Censorship, intellectual homogeneity, and uncivil discourse.
Yeah, I mean, I think the starting point is probably intellectual homogeneity.
Right. Okay.
I think that people are uncomfortable with disagreement, and they find it difficult being challenged, and to me, that goes against the purpose of academia. For me, being challenged is the absolute essence of academia.
Yes.
And then I think the other aspects really just follow from that. If you're not willing to be challenged, if you're not willing to debate, then you'll try and shut people down, so you lose the free inquiry, and that intolerance, that's what leads to the breakdown of civil discourse.
So there's a recent book by Greg Lukianoff and Ricky Schlott called The Cancelling of the American Mind, and they've looked into the statistics of cancellations in American universities, and they found that in terms of professors, academics being fired for their opinions, you'd have to go back to the McCarthy era for anything comparable. In fact, what we're living through now is far worse statistically than McCarthyism. And people still tell me there's no problem with free speech on campus. Why do they keep denying the observable truth?
I have no idea. I think I really wish that we could get the leadership of universities to acknowledge the fact that there is a problem with academic freedom. And I think the only way at the moment that we're likely to succeed in that is through the courts.
Right.
So there are various cases that are going through the employment tribunals at the moment, and I think that's going to wake universities up. And the other thing that is going to wake universities up is the new Higher Education Freedom of Speech Bill.
Yes.
So I think that's going to make them acknowledge there's a problem.
But don't you think when you have high-profile cases such as that of Kathleen Stock at the University of Sussex, and you see that, and you see students dressing up in masks, setting off flares, scrawling threats, basically driving a member of staff to the point where she has to resign, how can people then deny? I mean, that's just so high profile. People are now seeing it with their own eyes. And yet it seems to be in the interests of certain people to just pretend that's not real.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just very difficult because it opens up to university management. There's a really challenging problem they have to face there. And they've got a real difficulty that they've got to work with EDI teams that actually 5 seconds ago were supporting the cancellation. They've only just recently realised that actually, I mean, there was a point when an employment tribunal said that holding gender-critical beliefs wasn't worthy of respect in a democratic society.
Yes.
And everybody in university EDI went, great, in that case, we can do what we like with those people because their views are not worthy of respect. There was an appeal, and suddenly they became protected beliefs.
Yes.
And the EDI teams had to, turn on a dime and start protecting beliefs only a few seconds
Well, they
ago.
haven't done a very good job, to be honest. So this is the problem, really. You've got these bodies, equity, diversity and inclusion, EDI, embedded into various administrative roles throughout higher education in the UK. And this is a group, effectively, whose job it is to censor, to clamp down, to drive people away, and, in fact, to exclude in the name of inclusion. So
well, I wouldn't say that's their job.
I would say it's the upshot of what they do.
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, there is a need within universities, I think, for EDI, because we do need to, for example, maintain civil discourse. We do need to help people get along together when they have different views and different backgrounds. So there's a need for EDI.
Well, I think that's the opposite of what EDI does.
Well, I think that's true at the moment, but this is where I hope that groups like ours can come in, because we're hoping to try and provide sort of policy guidance to universities that we really hope will actually provide a sensible way forward to navigate these issues, because universities are going to have to navigate this, and they are going to have to find a way to both support their trans staff and students and their gender critical staff and students, and they're going to have to support their Muslim students and their Jewish students, and we've got to learn to live together.
But nobody is against all of that. I mean, like every student, every viewpoint should be protected and supported. The problem is when you've got a group of people who claim to be promoting diversity when they do the exact opposite. Wouldn't it be easy just to fire everyone who doesn't do their job properly?
Well, that was a question that was asked at our launch event on Monday. And I think there's quite a few people in the room who rather like the idea of getting rid of the EDI teams. But one has to work within the framework of the law. EDI does need to exist, and so we've got to work with the people there and find a way forward. You can do things like retrain people. You can explain to people the importance of academic freedom. And so, for example, I'm not aware of any training courses at our university on academic freedom, but we could introduce something like that, and I think those kind of practical steps would really help.
But when academics like you speak out about this, do you get any flack? I mean, there's a lot of academics who have the fashionable opinions, who quite like the current censorship that goes on. It's good for them, because they're not the ones who get censored, and they don't have to bother arguing with people they disagree with. So do you get any flack from those types?
Well, I'm relatively lucky, because as a man I seem to get less flack than women. They seem to get a bit more abuse targeted at them than me. But yeah, I think everybody involved in this gets some level of abuse, some level of discrimination. And the more one speaks out on it, the more discrimination one receives.
John Armstrong, thanks very much for joining me. There's lots more to come on Free Speech Nation, including a debate on the merits or otherwise of the president-elect of Argentina, an interview with the director of the Seaspiracy and Cowspiracy movies, and more questions from our wonderful studio audience. So please don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week. Myself, Cressida and Jonathan are about to be grilled once again by this wonderful studio audience. But first, let's get a news update from Aaron.
Thanks, Andrew. Very good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Thousands of people lining the streets have been cheering as a convoy carrying the 3rd group of hostages released by Hamas arrived in Israel. The International Red Cross says 17 captives made the journey from Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel's prison service has confirmed the release of 39 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. It's the 3rd of a 4-day pause in fighting. In total, the two sides have agreed to swap 50 Israeli hostages for 150 jailed Palestinians. A 4-year-old Israeli-American girl was amongst those to be released earlier. The US President Joe Biden has welcomed the news and says he hopes the truce will be extended.
So I'm hopeful this is not the end. It's going to continue. But we don't know. And but I get a sense that all the players in the region, even the neighbors who aren't and have been directly involved now, are looking for a way to end this so the hostages are all released and Hamas is completely, how can I say it, no longer in control of any portion of Gaza.
Israel's Prime Minister has told soldiers inside northern Gaza, "We'll continue until victory. No one will stop us." Benjamin Netanyahu was given security updates and he visited one of the tunnels discovered by his troops. The Prime Minister said, "We have 3 goals for this war: eliminate Hamas, return all our abductees and ensure Gaza does not become a threat to the state of Israel again." An Irish-Israeli girl who was initially feared dead has been reunited with her father following her release by Hamas late last night. 9-year-old Emily Hand was amongst the 17 hostages freed by the terror group yesterday after 50 days in captivity. 13 Israelis, along with 4 Thai nationals, were transported out of Gaza through the Rafah border crossing. Emily was kidnapped from a kibbutz on the 7th of October. A man's been arrested on suspicion of a racially aggravated public order offence in London as tens of thousands marched against anti-Semitism. Police say he was heard shouting at crowds towards the end of the day. It was the second of 2 arrests. Earlier, the founder of the English Defence League, Tommy Robinson, was detained after he tried to join the march. It comes amid concerns over a rise in hate crime in the UK sparked by the conflict in Gaza. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was at the march, described anti-Semitism as a virus which lurks beneath the floorboards of Western civilization.
What we're all doing here, and the only thing we're really doing, is showing solidarity with Jewish people. And that's necessary because since October the 7th, I'm afraid there's been a very peculiar response in many parts of the world, including, I'm sad to say, in London. And what we've seen is, I'm afraid, the re-emergence of anti-Semitism and a failure to focus on the appalling terroristic acts of Hamas.
Well, this is GB News. We're on TV, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker too. Now it is back to Free Speech Nation.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. I'm Andrew Doyle. We've got a wonderful studio audience here, so let's exploit them and get some more questions. So our first question from Annika. Where's Annika?
Right.
Hiya.
Yes. Have we been misgendering Roman emperors?
This is my favourite story of the week, I think. So this is the story about a museum, a museum in Hitchin, called the North Hertfordshire Museum, who decided that the Emperor Elagabalus was actually trans. And had preferred pronouns of she and lady, right? Now, I know quite a bit about Elagabalus, and this is actually a huge misreading, but it's really funny that they've
what possible argument do they make for that?
Well, because Elagabalus was bisexual, there are reports, accounts written by really hostile sources talking about how he wanted to, how can I put it, pre-watershed language. He wanted an operation to remove his genitalia, but this is actually more connected to his status as a high priest of his sun cult. And also...
So he was too pure for sexual behaviours, that kind of thing?
Oh, no, definitely not. I mean, no, he had a lot of that. But, in fact, he hired Roman men in Rome to scour the empire for, again, I'm going to put this delicately, for men who were well endowed.
Men in Rome.
Where he wanted them around. And he said he wanted to be called a lady in this sort of fetishistic way when he was having congress with the men. You see, I'm doing this very well.
Yeah, pretty watershed. Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff about Elagabalus which is absolutely fascinating. But to just simplistically say we should respect his pronouns as she, because once he said in the bedroom to a gentleman that he wanted to be called lady.
Well...
And we don't even know if that's true.
We don't know if it's true, and we wouldn't want to call Jonathan what he gets called.
Well, I dress up as a bear. So, yeah.
I mean, it just seems to be taking a teeny little bit of information and extrapolating and looking at it through this kind of present lens of what's fashionable now, rather
it was
than
funny. It wasn't just the museum, though. There's a local councillor who said, well, clearly we must respect Elagabalus's pronouns. But why would you respect this person anyway? This person tortured infants and castrated people against their will and threw their genitals to lions and snakes in the temple.
Doesn't sound like a good bloke.
Not a nice bloke.
No.
You know, so I don't think... I'm all for extending courtesy to people. Not them, not him, not her.
Seems very reasonable.
It's a bizarre one. Anyway, right, so we've got a question now from Kathy on email, and Kathy has said, should Tommy Robinson have been arrested? So this is now currently going viral online. This news broke just a couple of hours ago. So it was at the March Against Anti-Semitism. Tommy Robinson turned up and was arrested. There's lots of footage going around of him being arrested by the police. It doesn't look like he did anything at all provocative or violent. Now, this is... Well, you probably know a bit more about this, Jonathan, because you've been speaking to someone who was there when he was arrested.
Yes, I was speaking to Mark, you had on earlier?
Yeah, we had him on earlier.
He actually saw the event unfold. How I understand what happened was, I think the police and the event organisers of the march had already stated that they didn't want him there. I think they knew he was gonna turn up.
Yes.
And so they'd kind of made it clear that they didn't want him there. He then turned up as a, saying as a journalist, because you get more access to places, and then the police were having none of it, and they just essentially put him in a van. And
so what I can hear from when the police arrest him, they use the phrase, they say that you have the potential to cause alarm and distress.
Yes, that was it.
And therefore we are arresting you. And they tweeted out, so the Met Police tweeted out today saying, here's the tweet, a dispersal order under Section 35 of the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act has been in effect since just after 10 a.m. It covers Westminster and part of neighbouring boroughs. And here's the kicker. Anyone told by an officer to disperse who fails to do so is liable to arrest. Now, that seems horrendously
extreme.
authoritarian to me. So the idea that the police can just say, we want you to leave, we don't have to give a reason, and if you don't go, we'll arrest you. This is what we've been talking about on the show a lot, with the police crime and sentencing bill and things like this coming through, the current Tory government really pushing through regulations and laws, sneaking some in through before the coronation, basically to clamp down on our individual freedoms. This is really scary to me, because whatever you think about Tommy Robinson, if he's not breaking the law, if he's there at a public event. Now, I understand why the organisers wouldn't want him there, because it's very easy. Once Tommy Robinson and the EDL are present at an event, it's very easy for opponents of the event to smear the whole thing as being far-right or whatever they want to call it. But I don't care what you think about Tommy Robinson. He's got a right to be there if he wants to. It's a free society.
Absolutely. I mean, I sympathise with the police in that it's obviously a very difficult day. It's a busy day. I shouldn't say difficult.
It didn't look high tension, actually, from the footage.
Having been there, it wasn't at all. But I mean, it's a day when they're going to be on alert, aren't they? They want things to go smoothly. But I completely agree. Once you can't say we want a right to protest unless, and then bracket off. Just it's got to be for everybody, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it does feed into this idea that the police are sort of being quite partisan in the way they're policing things. I mean, we've seen them at sort of pro-Palestine demonstrations doing nothing when people are throwing fireworks at them or calling for the death of Jewish people. That's OK.
But if Tommy Robinson... I mean, I'm no admirer of Tommy Robinson, despite accidentally getting the same haircut the other day. But, like, I mean...
It wasn't deliberate, though, was it?
It wasn't deliberate.
You didn't go in and say, I want
I tried to get a Prince, but it didn't work. But, yeah, I mean, it does... If he was just turning up as a member of the public, wanting to, or as a journalist, if he's not breaking the law, you should be allowed there, right? I mean, you can't just be banned because it's bad optics.
I think it's a bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
In The Independent, they were kind of implying he shouldn't be there because he's from the far right and he might upset the Jewish people. And I thought, let them be the judge of that.
Yeah.
That's a bizarre...
Well, also, the organisers of the march are perfectly within their right to say, we don't want him there. And even if he turns up to say, we don't want you here, to say that to him.
Yes.
But they can't force him to leave.
No.
And they certainly can't weaponise the police to get rid of him. Either way, it's just dodgy. Anyway, look. No doubt we'll be covering this again in future weeks because it is ramping up. Anyway, the next question is from Christina. Where's Christina? Hiya.
Hello. Does Labour have a women problem?
Well, I think definitely... Well, I suppose this is in relation to Rosie Duffield, what's happened with her. And, Rosie Duffield has had a terrible time as a Labour MP. She couldn't go to her last Labour Party conference because of the threats from militant activists. And all she's done is stand up for women's rights. That's all that's happened. And has said that the women need to have single-sex spaces. It's really important to women's rights. I suppose I should ask a woman. But what do you think?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Well, you know what's happened now? So Rosie Duffield liked a tweet by Graham Linehan, which was criticising, I think, Eddie Izzard.
Yes.
And now that has been weaponised against Rosie Duffield, and people have said that this is anti-Semitic. Now, Rosie Duffield is one of the few Labour MPs that was really outspoken against saying no anti-Semitism. She was really outspoken when that crisis was going on in the Labour Party. To pretend that she's anti-Semitic because you don't like her gender-critical views, that's what's going on here,
I think
isn't
so,
it?
yeah, I think it's I know you are, but what am I? It's absolutely not what she was saying at all. Eddie Izzard was tweeting saying that he or she, it's he if it's Eddie, I guess, wouldn't have been would have been a hero in Nazi Germany, but would have almost a martyr, is what he was implying. And Linehan, of course, has said, well, actually, you're a straight blonde man. So he's kind of claiming some sort of martyrdom, which is
he's a grief thief.
Right, it's a very odd thing to do anyway. And of course.
And then Rosie, but interesting, but liking a tweet shouldn't be a crime anyway.
Exactly. Why am I getting into
But also, liking a tweet, just because some people have misinterpreted the tweet as being anti-Semitic, I don't think they have, really, actually. I think this is just a lie.
Yeah.
What do you think? Sorry, Jonathan.
Well, I mean, Graham Linehan was at the march against anti-Semitism today, so I think...
Yeah, no, he's clearly... No, that's not even a discussion. He's clearly not anti-Semitic.
It sounds like classic projection as well. Like, you like this tweet, so you're anti-Semitic? It was like, well, are you just putting your own kind of...
Yeah, I mean, the issue here really is just that Rosie Duffield has been one of the few Labour MPs to be brave enough to take a stance for women's rights within a party that appears to be hostile to women's rights, as far as I can see.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's too far to say.
No, and it's this thing that happens now where in some topics we have to be extremely careful and everybody gets the least generous interpretation of the language they use. And then other times they get extremely generous interpretations, and she's fallen foul of that.
Yes, because at the moment it's looking like she's not eligible to stand because they're looking into this. But again, all of these things, they constantly weaponise, you know, one or two activists complain about something and the whole world has to change. And I think maybe it has to be the point where people just say, and particularly people in political parties have to say, you can have your complaint, but you don't get to change things.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Anyway, let's move on now to a question from Marcus. Where's Marcus? Hello.
Hi, yeah. Should we abolish the Home Office?
Well, Richard Tice thinks so. So did you see this, Marcus, Richard Tice saying that? No, he did. Well, Richard Tice said he thought the Home Office was not fit for purpose anymore. Now, there was an interesting whistleblower from the Home Office, some civil servant, and this was in the Telegraph, I think, this week, wasn't it, saying that, effectively, whatever the government tell the Home Office to do, the members of staff at the Home Office, in terms of immigration, won't implement it because they think that they believe in open borders. But the Home Office is meant to be politically impartial and is meant to implement what the democratically elected people tell them to do. So that's a fundamentally undemocratic situation that we have. So is Richard Tice right that we should just get rid of him?
Well, are they doing that because they're activists? Or well, no, they shouldn't. It doesn't
matter.
Duty,
I don't care what their opinions are.
Yeah,
and I don't care what whether the rights or wrong of what the government wants them to do.
If it's a government body or affiliated body that doesn't do what it's set up to do, then it sounds pretty worthless.
Well, this happens again and again with the Quangos. We had this with the College of Policing. And the College of the Policing are the body that train the police force, and they are captured by activists and an ideology, effectively. And they kept teaching the police about this thing they'd invented called non-crime hate incidents. And, we had thousands of people investigated for non-crime because the police had been trained that that's what they're meant to do. That's why so many police now believe that their job is to police people's thoughts and their speech, right?
It's unbelievable.
But then Priti Patel, who was then Home Secretary, told them that you can't do that. They ignored her. The High Court said that non-crime hate incidents are unlawful. College of Policing ignored them as well. So effectively, you've got these Quangos and these bodies and these non-governmental organisations that just don't care about, A, the law, or B, what our democratically elected representatives tell them to do.
Yes, so maybe Richard Tice is right on this one.
You seem reluctant to want to agree with him.
It just sounds a bit heavy, doesn't it? Get rid of the Home Office. Or maybe get a new Home Office. I don't know. Yeah, it feels like Yes Minister, doesn't it? It's just...
Well, it's exactly like Yes Minister. Yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
OK, well, we've got another question. I think we've got time. Yeah, a question from Sue. Hi, Sue.
Hi. When will the FA stand up for safety and fair play for women footballers?
Yes. So, Sue, I presume you're talking about this recent controversy. They've included... it's a team that isn't... it's a younger team, isn't it? They've included a biological male player in a women's game. And this is a male who identifies as female. Now, obviously, my view of this is very simple. We have to protect women's sports. It's not fair for people who've been through male puberty to participate in sports with women because they have a natural physical advantage, no matter how much estrogen or how much hormone treatment they have.
Yeah, I mean, if they are going to step in, they should do it quickly because we're on the verge of the end of women's sport.
Do you really believe that?
Yeah, I do, because, I mean, as we've covered previously, I don't personally... It's not for me. It's not my personal problem.
You're not shot put days are over, yeah.
My what days?
Shot put?
My shot put days.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll be shot putting you later. But of course, it's the end of... If you're a serious competitor and you've got to the point where you think there's no way I can win, and also now these women think that their safety is... Well, somebody's just had her ankle broken by this person because they're just a lot larger than the female players. You're not going to turn up for much longer, are you?
And these are young players we're talking about. It's very tragic. I mean, when Leah Thomas, said that he was a woman and he won all those swimming races and he's towering on the podium over the other women, and you just think, everyone knows this isn't fair.
It doesn't feel like sport at that point, does it?
No, of course not. And I've spoken to athletes on this show who have said, Mari Yamauchi, for instance, who said, as an elite athlete, you work for months and months trying to shave off a second here, a second there, and these blokes come in...
something else, yeah.
Well, quite. So what do you think?
I actually think it's a shame to remove this transgender player because, there was finally a player on the pitch who understood the offside rule.
Outrageous! On that note, let's get another question. So this is from Teresa on Twitter. Teresa said, is the Israel-Hamas ceasefire a good idea? So, now, this is an interesting question because, of course, we all want to see those hostages returned, and it's very moving to see them being returned, albeit gradually, But the ceasefire can also really benefit Hamas in terms of this conflict. It will mean that they could potentially monitor the IDF, sort of get a sense of where they are, regroup, find, it does give them an advantage at this point. What do you think about this? Because it is a difficult judgment to make. They're saving the lives of these innocent people, but will it cost more innocent lives in the long run?
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't trust Hamas as far as I could throw it. How can you? I mean, I know people often, they say, what's the difference between a Palestinian life and an Israeli life? And I totally accept that. If you've lost your child, it doesn't matter which side you're on.
Of course, all life is important.
But what I am interested in is the person who's able to commit those crimes. And I think what's happened from Hamas is just so bizarre to me. I don't know how you engage with people.
Well, they had a previous prisoner exchange a number of years ago. There were 1,000 Palestinian prisoners released for just one IDF soldier. That was what was going on back then. One of those prisoners that was released was the mastermind of the October 7th attack. So there's an example of how, when you release these people, you end up with over 1,000 deaths, right? So it's serious, and it's difficult, I think, for the Israeli government to make this call at the moment.
Yeah.
But, when you see those photographs of those children and individuals who've been kidnapped and brutalised, you want them back, no matter what. Yeah. So what do you do?
I mean, I don't think I've got really any wise to add, but I think in the immediate time, I think just getting those people back, getting the hostages back is super important, and then just getting super defensive afterwards, making sure nothing like this can ever happen again. Obviously, easier said than done.
But how? I mean, the point is, really, aren't Israel at a point where they have to eliminate Hamas? Because Hamas has said they're going to keep doing this.
Yeah,
They've said it quite openly.
Within the doctrine, yeah.
But how do they do that?
Yeah.
It's
huge doses of LSD, just change everyone's mind.
I mean, what on earth are you going to do? Yeah. OK, so next up on Free Speech Nation, the new president-elect of Argentina has stirred debate around the world. Is he an eccentric genius or a danger to democracy? We're going to be discussing that just after the break.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
To Free Speech Nation. So it's been a week of seismic political events in Argentina, where the right-wing populist Javier Milei is now president-elect after securing a decisive win after a bitter election campaign. A former TV pundit, Milei is known for wielding a chainsaw on the campaign trail in order to indicate that the cuts that he wants to make to the state. His critics say his election is a disaster for democracy in Argentina and gives succor to other extremists around the world. But Milei's supporters say his libertarian policies herald a new dawn for the nation. So here to discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Virginia Tuckey, Chair of Republicans Overseas Argentina. Welcome to the show. Do you think that Javier Milei is a danger to democracy? Oh, I'm afraid we've lost our connection. This is the perils of live television. But thankfully, I've got my panel here to step in seamlessly. Cressida Wetton, is Javier Milei a danger to democracy?
Well, he's a danger to fashion, isn't he? I don't know if you've seen the haircut.
Meow.
He's quite eccentric. We say meow. The other thing I know about him is that he's a big dog person. Like,
yes.
He had this dog, and when it died, he was so upset that he cloned it, and he's now got 3 or 4 dogs of the same breed that are descended from the dog.
Can you do that?
You can clone dogs?
Well, apparently he's done it, so I don't know. And they're also
He's a
saying that
danger
he
to
takes-
Crufts.
He takes political advice from the dog.
Well, he's also a tantric sex expert.
Well, they get so I mean, would you rather take advice from the dog or our Home Office? I don't know.
Well, so dog cloner, tantric sex expert, never seen a hairbrush. Yeah. Is there an issue here, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, there might be an issue. I don't think there's necessarily an issue to democracy because he won an election.
We just got voted in, so it's interesting if people say he's a danger to democracy.
That is
because he won more votes.
That sounds pretty patronising to the people of Argentina, saying you guys are doing democracy wrong. I mean,
well, I believe that we've got our guest back, Virginia Tuckey. Virginia, are you there?
I'm here. I can hear you now.
Wonderful. Lovely to hear from you, Virginia. Can you tell us, a lot of people are saying that Javier Milei is a danger to democracy. Do you believe that that is the case?
Hi, and well, thank you for having me here. No, I don't think so. Actually, he was elected in Argentina because Argentina was in the verge of becoming a very authoritarian country. We are on a 40% poverty here. 60% of children don't eat all the meals necessary in Argentina. 1 million people emigrated. So Milei only said, we are gonna cut taxes, we are gonna open the market and try to live free. So that's not an extremist. He's, what can I say? He is quite eccentric, but he's not a danger for democracy. Actually, people voted him because people was sick and tired of being controlled by the government.
But do you think, Virginia, that this is a sign of desperation? That a lot of people wouldn't normally vote for him, but they're doing it because they're desperate, because this has been, one of the most thriving economies in the world now has been utterly obliterated by successive policies. Do you think that this is just a desperate act, that people are voting for him in spite of his eccentricities, rather than because of his eccentricities?
That could be one of the explanations, because he got like almost 60% of the vote, and he was always he was a star on TV. He was always talking about his libertarian ideas, so everyone knew what he was talking about, and he's very good at explaining economics and how it works, that you see a lot of young people talking in libertarian terms or classical liberal economic terms, and that you haven't seen that in Argentina for 100 years. So yes, could be a sign of desperation, but also people know what they are voting. What I want to add is that in cases like in Argentina now, in this context, you can have people, outsiders. It's very normal to have outsiders who get elected. And you could have someone who was promising, and we had that on the ballot, on the primaries, someone who was promising to take the land and share it. It was a communist message, and Argentinians didn't go for that message. Argentinians went for the libertarian message. And yes, he's eccentric. He had a rock band. He has, that style that might seem like maybe he's crazy or no, but I mean, when you listen to him in the way he talks, he's good at economics. People who are freedom lovers, I mean, will agree with Javier Milei. Of course, now he's in government, he will have to, make decisions and talk to other parties, and he's already doing that. And the only people that are angry in Argentina are those that are very aligned with Venezuela, Cuba, and, all these countries that are very tyrannical. But from the center to the right, everyone agrees we need a change and we need to cut taxes, we need to solve inflation, and we need to open the markets here. Argentina is very close. You couldn't believe if you come here, and the poverty rates are high, it's skyrocketed.
Absolutely.
So,
OK, well, Virginia Tuckey, that's all we've got time for. Thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate that. I want to bring in my panel very quickly. Now, she's making the case that people from the right, from the centre to the centre-right think that this is a good thing, that they've heard the libertarian message here. He's an anarcho-capitalist. Virginia seemed to be saying that it's only the sort of radical left who have a problem with this, socialist countries, socialist governments. Is she right?
Well, she might be. We're familiar with that idea, aren't we? That a few people on the left might moan more loudly than the bulk of the voters. If they voted, they've voted, haven't they?
Yeah, but it's been interesting watching the coverage over here, because a lot of the newspapers, The Guardian particularly, has been saying that Javier Milei is far-right. I think they call him a far-right libertarian, which I didn't realise was even possible.
I've also seen The Guardian call a lamppost far-right. I know. No, everyone's far-right according to The Guardian. But nonetheless, are there any far-right policies that he's espousing? I haven't seen any. What I've seen is him talk, and he doesn't mince his words, talk very, very sort of negatively and comically and quite extremely about leftists. He's saying, with a lot of expletives and stuff like that.
Yes, which you're not going to repeat.
Which I'm not going to repeat. I've learned my lesson. I've been fined.
Yeah.
And basically, I can see he's definitely an extreme character, whether or not he's far-right, not from what I've seen.
Well, the closest... look, he's anti-abortion, but that's probably more coming from the fact that it's a Catholic country. This is,
But he's a tantric sex guy.
Well, exactly. So he's very confused on social issues.
Must be on point.
This is the thing. But I just think this phrase far-right is actually completely inaccurate, just from what I can see.
I'm immediately suspicious in general when I hear that nowadays.
Yes, exactly. OK. That's all we got time for in this section. But next up on Free Speech Nation, the filmmaker responsible for the popular documentaries Seaspiracy and Cowspiracy will be here to tell us about his new project, Christspiracy. See you in a moment.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Film director Kip Anderson has become well known of late after making 3 of the most successful documentary films of recent times. They include What the Health, executive produced by Joaquin Phoenix, Cowspiracy, executive produced by Leonardo DiCaprio, and Seaspiracy, about the environmental impact of fishing. And he now has a film called Christspiracy, which looks at the link between animal ethics and religions. Let's have a look.
Is there any threat or danger making a film like this?
Yeah, you just wait and see. You just wait and see. They will stop at nothing to keep this truth from getting known.
Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? I'll put it this way. How would Jesus kill an animal?
And film director Kip Anderson joins me now to tell us more. Kip, thanks so much for joining us here today on Free Speech Nation. Can I ask you, there's a very intriguing trailer that you've got there. It's almost as though you're not telling us the full story. Can you tell us a bit more about what the documentary explores?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for having me on. Yes, well, as you mentioned, Cowspiracy and Seaspiracy explored the environmental impacts of raising and killing billions of animals in the ocean, trillions. And What the Health explored the health impacts of raising and killing so many animals and then consuming them. This film explores the ethical impacts of raising and killing 70 billion animals per year and how that ties into religion. Where did this all begin? That right now we're killing the equivalent of the entire world's population 10 times over every single year. Where did this begin? And there's a tie to religion, which is incredibly fascinating.
Now, I saw when you were fundraising for this project that you'd rescued 2 baby lambs from a halal farm. How are they getting on?
They're getting along great. Yes, thank you. Yeah, we're doing a Kickstarter campaign, which you'll probably mention. This was a Netflix original, but we've moved ways from Netflix with this film. So we're doing a Kickstarter campaign, creating history, really. And your viewers can jump in. We have 1 more week left to go to fund for this.
Fantastic. Can I ask you about that, Kip? Was there some sort of conflict with Netflix? Because obviously you've had such success with them before. I know that there's a lot of people who don't want you to make this film. Am I reading too much into this?
Well, no, I'm so grateful for Netflix. I love Netflix. So grateful for all they've done. This film is a difficult one. Anytime you're bringing in religion and you're bringing in killing animals and the ethics of eating and consuming animals, you're bringing some very powerful industries in there. And we wanted to tell the story in a particular way. Such a sensitive topic. And long story short, they wanted to go one direction. We wanted to go deeper in the direction we were going. And we understand why they would want to, but we felt very strongly this film had to be told in a certain way to have the most impact. So we stayed surprisingly very, very strong and true and walked away from the Netflix original, which I'm not sure how many times has been done, but we boldly have done that.
But you wanted to tell the story in your own way, and you needed that freedom to have the independence to do it. Well, I think that's a really interesting approach to take. But it is a very complicated issue, isn't it? And you are in very murky ethical territory when it comes to the killing of animals for ritual purposes, because, of course, then you're potentially opening yourself up to being accused of criticising people's religious freedom. Do you think that's right?
Well, the thing with this film, along with the other films, what we do is we ask questions. We ask theologians, we ask, in this film, archaeologists, theologians, Oxford professors. This actually film is a lot based in England, with the intellectual and the knowledge base of the history of this. But we really are sensitive with this because we don't want to judge anyone's religion or anyone's beliefs. We just want to ask questions. Where did this come from? What is the history of this? Where does not only Jesus, where does Buddha tie into this? Because there's a direct link, and I can't give too much away, but we definitely are very respectful for everybody's decisions.
Now, my understanding is that with the Kickstarter, you've actually increased the amount that you want to try and reach now. I think you want to go up to $500,000. But that is still very cheap for compared to sort of how much Hollywood films cost these days. But will you be hoping to make improvements to the film with greater support from the people who are going to be watching it?
We are, yes. This is just kind of the bare bones. We're looking to raise as much as we can because, yes, these big Hollywood films, they have tens, millions of dollars in budget into creating a theatrical release, which is one of our big goals, is do a theatrical release next year. We feel with the strong following and the strong fans that we have and everyone who's really interested in this topic, we're going to be able to do a viral sensation where everybody, it's one of these films like the other ones. When one person watches it, they tell 10 people, and it goes on and on and on. This one is going to be, they tell 108 people. So yeah, we really feel confident that's how it's going to go.
So Kip, can I ask you, how do you approach making a documentary? Does it come from a place of passion, a particular theme or a topic that you're particularly interested in and you just delve into it? Or do you sometimes start not really knowing what the outcome will be?
This one, more than the previous films, I didn't know where it was going to end up. I knew, Cowspiracy was 10 years ago. At that time, that film was going to be the environmental, health, and ethical impacts of raising and killing, as I said, billions of animals, trillions that include the ocean. And I kind of knew the direction where that was going. This one was a full exploration. We went all around the world, and it was, one of the biggest reveals when you see the film. That was a surprise to us. And then to have it validated by, Oxford professors, theologians. This is a massive film beyond just the genre of say, animal ethics. This is a film that really will rewrite what it means to be Christian and early Christianity. It's a big one.
Yeah, well, it sounds very, very intriguing, and I can't wait to see it. Just remind us before you go, how can people participate in donating to your Kickstarter?
So, yeah, so GB News viewers, they have just a few more days left to be part of history. They can go to Kickstarter and search Christspiracy. The whole word's Christspiracy, the sustainability secret. And we have incredible perks for anyone who joins. And you get early access. That's a great thing. You get early access even before it goes in the theaters. So you'll be able to get in the know before anyone else. And you'll get to know the secret before anyone else.
Well, Kip Anderson is a fascinating project. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
It sounds very interesting, and it is always an ethical minefield, isn't it, this issue of religious freedom versus animal rights, particularly when it comes to religious ritual slaughter, which can be particularly painful for the animals, and then you are in murky territory.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I know which side I naturally fall on,
yes.
But I don't know whether that's the right side.
What side is that, Cressida?
The animal side.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, I'm a softie like you. I don't eat meat, and
you used to have a baby lamb?
I did, yeah. I did some backpacking, worked on a sheep farm and raised a couple of lambs.
You see, that's what kind of thing. Once you've met lambs, it's very difficult to cut them up and eat them.
Yeah, but you can say that about dogs as well, and we eat dogs.
You eat dogs.
Jonathan,
it's
you
not
are
the norm,
a dog.
Jonathan.
I'll stop eating dogs. No, what do I think? So basically, I learned about the laws of kashrut or kosher as a kid, and from what I understood, the whole point was the ritual slaughter would be done in a way that you respect the animal, obviously you're killing it, and you try and kill it in the way that's as painless as possible. Right. That's what's commanded. Obviously now, with modern technological advancements, you're probably not doing it in the most painless way, and it seems really brutal compared to the other options. So
yes.
I can see why there's obviously a big discussion around it.
Would you watch Kip's film?
No, he seemed like a rad dude. He seemed like
rad dude?
He seemed like a cool guy.
What kind of phrase is that?
He's obviously a rad dude. Look at him.
I don't think I've ever used the phrase rad dude. I don't think I can get away with it.
I don't think I can get away with it.
I heard it, Kip is exactly what I would picture. Yeah, cowabunga, etc.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds
cowabunga.
It sounds like a film I quite want to see. OK, well, anyway, next on Free Speech Nation, Cliff Richard causes a stir on This Morning. Nigel Farage has a row with Nella Rose. And it turns out that falling asleep at work can have negative consequences. It's almost time for Social Sensations. Do not go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, 20% of voters haven't decided who they're going to vote for at the next election, which means it's all to play for in a year's time. My Mark Meets guest is family values Conservative presidential hopeful Dr. Taylor Marshall. Plus, full reaction to Nigel Farage's first week in the jungle with former stars of the show and detailed analysis. A packed programme. We're live at 9.
Part of Free Speech Nation, and it's time for Social Sensations. That's part of the show where we look at what's been going viral on social media. And first up, during an interview on This Week, singer Cliff Richard admitted he didn't want to meet Elvis. Let's have a look at what he said.
I did not. I had one chance through a journalist when I was promoting Devil Woman in the States.
Yeah.
He said, oh, I know Elvis, because he knew that I was influenced. And he said, would you want to meet him? I said, yeah. At the end of the interview, though, I said, can we put it off? Because he'd put on a lot of weight.
Oh, right.
And I thought, if I'm having a photograph taken with him and it's going to be hanging on my refrigerator, he's got to look good. And I put it off, and of course, then he died.
Should never put it off just because they're a little bit heavier.
No. If anybody has got, if you're a fan of somebody's, you should, if you get the chance to meet them, meet them, even if they've put on weight.
Is that why you don't want me at your house? Anyway.
It's an odd one, that, isn't it?
It's such a rich tapestry, isn't it? He's being so rude in the presence of a variety of body shapes that are all beautiful. And I'm stunned.
But he obviously didn't think it was offensive. He obviously thought it was fine to sort of say, I don't want to meet fat people. It was basically what
what planet is he living on? He must be surrounded by people that say, yes, Sir Cliff, every day.
Yeah, maybe. But also the chance to meet Elvis Presley, you don't say, well, when he's been on the treadmill a bit, then I'll think about it.
But also,
you
who
just
doesn't want a fat person next to them? Then you look thinner. Come on, think it through.
Well, that's a good point, yeah. Because he's never had weight problems,
right,
Cliff Richard. He's always been svelte, hasn't he? What do you make of that, Jonathan?
I get it. You know, I was at a wedding with my girlfriend. I didn't want a picture taken. She, had a starter and a main. I understand.
Jonathan Cogan.
Yeah.
You're always taking the contrary view.
I am. I'm a regular Lewis Schaefer. No, I wish. But no, it's... what do I think? Yeah, he missed out meeting Elvis. And Fat Elvis is the best Elvis. I mean, not musically or spiritually or performance-wise, just it's the funniest Elvis, that's for sure.
But, I mean, also, Cliff Richard, I mean, he's an older gentleman, so maybe it's just... Was it that just the norm back in the day? I don't know. When he was doing Devil Woman?
I guess, I think, we have to stop being stunned when extraordinary people are extraordinary, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the other thing. Is that artists and creatives sometimes say bonkers things.
Yes.
And they should be allowed to.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I think it's bonkers from Cliff there.
It is. But Devil Woman's a great song. You can't get around that, really. Whatever you think of Cliff. Anyway, let's move on to another clip now. This was YouTuber Nella Rose. Now, this is to do with The Jungle Show, which Nigel's in at the moment, and he got into a discussion about immigration. Let's see what happened.
But this is what I was saying to you.
Apparently you're anti-immigrants.
Who told you that?
Oh, the internet.
Oh, well, there we are, then. It must be true. It must be true.
It must be.
It must be true.
OK, but then why don't black people like you?
You'd be amazed they do. You'd be amazed.
Nigel!
If you came with me... If you came with me...
Who is that woman? I don't know. She's an Instagram influencer or something?
I think she's a TikTok gal.
Is she TikTok?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, that's bonkers again.
It wasn't an argument, it was just
what the internet told me, therefore it must be true. I like that argument.
That I agree with. But yeah. I mean, Nigel seemed to take that in good spirit. He didn't
He seemed to handle it quite well, didn't he?
He's probably had a lot worse.
But is that what the show is? I haven't seen the show. I know they eat a lot of insects, but then do they just argue the rest of the time? Is that
You're more of a Selling Sunset guy, as I understand
I don't know what that is. What's that one?
Don't watch reality TV.
No, don't watch reality TV.
It's pole feed, we all know that. But
no, I used to watch the Celebrity Big Brother when Pete Burns was in it with George Galloway and Dennis Rodman and Tracy Bingham. That was a masterpiece. But this looks terrible, though.
It made me feel depressed when I saw that. I mean, you can't call it a disagreement if one person just hasn't heard what the other person said, can you?
But it is quite indicative, isn't it? Because today, a lot of the time, people do just sort of believe what they hear about political figures.
Yes.
And they don't bother to investigate or interrogate it whatsoever themselves.
No, there's no spirit of inquiry there whatsoever.
That's the phrase, spirit of inquiry. No, but that's quite generally true anyway.
Yeah.
You see, back in the day when all my friends were lefties, and they used to tell me that there were these evil conservatives out there, and now they're mostly my friends, and I realise they're actually all really nice. And it was actually a lot of my old friends who are the evil satanic ones.
Yes.
Yeah. It's an interesting development.
Not
Name and shame.
No, not generalising whatsoever. OK, let's move on now. No, you weren't demonised. No one could demonise you. You're
no
a
one knows who I am.
No one knows who you are, that's why.
I've got 4 followers.
And now this is a video that's gone viral on X this week, which used to be known as Twitter, but we still call it Twitter, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And it shows that if you fall asleep on the job, you never know what might fall onto you. Now, I'm going to talk over this one because we've got some radio listeners. Let's have a look at this clip. So there's a guy in some green mechanical cart falling asleep, and he's colliding with... Oh,
God. Oh, wow.
I can't even... He's basically almost got crushed to death by various boxes and... Oh, he's actually destroyed the entire warehouse from the looks of things.
Wow.
Now, how did that... That must be set up. How did that happen? He just sort of nudged into it and the whole thing collapsed.
It looked like the whole of IKEA fell on you when you're trying to get one shelf out.
Yes, but if that happened, surely that's a problem with the warehouse. That's a safety issue with it. Like that, it should be able to withstand a gentle nudge. Surely.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know where that was. That looks... that makes me pro health and safety.
Really?
Somebody needs to check it.
What do you make of that, Jonathan?
That was the most exciting thing I've seen in quite a while.
It's definitely exciting.
He nearly got squished, but like you say, I mean, why shouldn't a man be able to drive a heavy vehicle into a shelf and not expect it to fall over?
Well, quite right.
Yeah.
But look, we should say that he's perfectly fine. He's not even injured, so, it's all fine.
A hell of a compensation claim.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. OK, now we're going to talk through your unfiltered dilemmas, and our first dilemma comes in from Jane. Jane has said, the other day I was on a busy train home from work and a lady had impolitely placed her handbag on the empty seat next to her. Is this poor etiquette? Can anyone relate to my frustration? Jonathan?
It's obvious. Get a handbag, unzip, urinate in it. Teach her a lesson.
Jonathan, for goodness sake, you're so extreme.
I'm a man of extremes.
You are, aren't you?
Ever since I got this Tommy Robinson haircut, I've just been they're kicking off. Now, what do I think? I don't know. Yeah, just say, sorry, madam, would you move your bag? That's what you got to do.
Just be polite.
Just be polite.
Yeah.
And that's it, be polite.
You can be polite.
Yeah.
Excellent, good to know. Well, we don't know how busy the train was, do we? I mean, if there are any other seats... my last option would always be to engage with the person.
Yes.
I would be...
Well, you're very British like that, aren't you?
I'm very British.
Yeah.
I kick the walls up. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be rushing to chat to her about her hand.
No, probably not. I think we've got time for one more dilemma. This one's from Linda, with a Y. That's unconventional. In my husband's search history, he had been looking at female underwear. It's definitely not the sort of stuff a woman in her 60s would be wearing. Is he possibly cheating? Well, I mean, it's interesting. I don't think so. Maybe he's just dabbling in transvestism?
Yeah.
Maybe he is.
Bit of harmless transvestism?
In this case, the first thing I would do would be to talk to the person.
Really?
If it's your partner, I think that's... come on, let's have a chat. What's going on?
Maybe he's just curious, though. I don't think you can assume from that. What I'm saying is I don't think that's sufficient evidence for cheating.
No, absolutely not. It could be, as you said, he's got an alternative lifestyle. Maybe she can join in. You know, I think it's fine.
Right, exactly.
I wouldn't be worried.
Well, I was Googling armadillos the other day because I was just interested in their lifestyle. It doesn't mean I want to get one. But if you looked at my search history, you'd be like, who's this armadillo?
You might want to be a furry armadillo. You might get a full bodysuit.
Maybe, but I'm almost...
And that's all we've got time for.
Yes, it is all we've got time for, thankfully. Thanks for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Dublin rioted, the Labour Party turned on women again, and a Roman emperor was outed as trans. Thank you to my panel, Cressida Wetton and Jonathan Cogan, and to all of my guests this evening. And by the way, if you want to join us live in the studio, be part of our wonderful live studio audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. It's right there on the screen for you. And do stay tuned because Mark Dolan tonight is coming up next. And don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 o'clock. That's the late night paper preview show where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. Thanks ever so much for watching Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. See you next week.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News forecast. There's further rain as we move through the next 24 hours, but it does slip away. It turns brighter but also colder at the same time. Low pressure bringing that rain at the moment, but it does start to move away as we head through the end of Monday, allowing higher pressure to build in, and it turns a little drier, but also colder too. Through this evening and overnight, a lot of cloud around, outbreaks of rain keeping the frost at bay. We could see a little bit of frost through the glens of Scotland, but also some wintry showers moving in, leading to some icy stretches here. Generally, with the cloud and rain, temperatures holding up, a milder night, 7 to 8 degrees for quite a bit of the country. But it does mean a cloudy, damp, dull start to the day, outbreaks of rain, which should be heavy at times. But it does slowly push southeastwards through the morning into the afternoon, allowing the skies to brighten. Sunny spells, Northern Ireland, Western Scotland. Later, western fringes of England and Wales, staying quite cloudy and showery in the east. Cool here, temperatures 6 or 7 degrees, an early max in the south around 10 or 11 before the colder air arrives here. On Tuesday, a cold start to the day, some mist and fog patches, wintry showers, icy stretches across the far north. And then for most, it will be dry, plenty of sunny spells through the day, just some showers across the northern half of the UK, and it stays cold through the week with an increasing risk of rain and snow as we head into Thursday.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you 3.
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, 20% of the public haven't decided who they're going to vote for at the next election, which means it's all to play for in a year's time. Are Labour celebrating victory too soon? I'll be giving my unapologetic verdict shortly. In the big story, an explosive new book from Harry and Meghan